much.
Why are you the
Oh, it's very tolerant. What was that?
You heard what I said.
So you're actually filming yourself treating another woman like this?
Yep.
Thank you so much for showing what the Democratic Party is like.
She's white and you're black and you're calling her names. Can you imagine if it went the other way? You'd call her a racist.
Excuse me?
Yeah, you're being a racist.
Why are you so racist?
Why are you a racist?
You gotta admit. Oh, hell no. Crazy, man.
As crazy as you just walking up to a total stranger and cussing them out?
Stranger.
You don't know her.
You know your mother on Twitter.
I don't think you know her.
Caitlin Bennett, you went to Kent.
But you don't know her, so you walked up to a stranger and you cussed them out. What sense does that make? Do you know which one of us is going to look stupid on the video?
Which one?
I don't know. You tell me.
You have Make America Great Again and you're black.
What's that have to do with anything?
Are you racist?
Wait, what
are you saying black people can't support Trump?
Make America Great Again, like ask for what? Like
You're not going to find sympathy from them.
What do you mean? What do I mean?
Was it great before or something?
Yeah. It's the greatest country in the world.
What happened?
I don't know. Can you name another country where it's better to be a black person than America?
First of all,
name one country where it's better to be a person of color than America.
I'm just asking.
I'm asking
you.
Is
America bad right now again or something? Because you're saying Make America Great Again, like it's bad right now.
So apparently it's pretty bad if people can walk up to people of a different color and insult them that way and then not have any remorse for that. That's a problem. We need to change that.
Anything else?
Why would you treat somebody that way that you didn't know?
Wait, what's your association to Caitlin?
She's my friend.
Oh, okay.
Oh, I have something to say. Follow my Instagram, jmantella15_. Yeah, you already know.
Why not?
Why?
Because you just made yourself look stupid. Now, when we put it on our stuff, now everybody's gonna.
Shit. Follow me though.
When I arrived at Evergreen a year ago, a group of faculty and staff discussing diversity and equity asked me to help improve the college's work on these issues. And as I became involved, I learned about inequities in the experiences of our students that were outrageous. Particularly those experiences of our underrepresented and underserved students. And it became very clear to me that a council of faculty, dedicated faculty, staff, and students would be needed to tackle the problems of equity gaps in our students' experiences. And late last spring, I established and charged this equity council, this incredible equity council, with developing a plan for institutional change.
And I think a lot of people are too focused on, okay, well, what color are they? Well, when you only focus on electing people of color, you do a disservice to Martin Luther King because he wanted people of character. He said, I want to see people judged by the content of their character. I don't want to see people judged by the color of their skin. And I feel like in America, a lot of people are still trying to judge people by the color of their skin and not giving any concern to their character. Ilhan Omar is a perfect example. She said things like some people did something in reference to the 9/11 attacks. The worst terrorist attack in history, that should affect every American. Who cares if they're a person of color or not, whether or not they're offended by that, that should offend everyone. Because as Americans, when someone wants to come and destroy our way of life, we should oppose that. And people said, oh, we shouldn't speak out against her because she's a person of color. No, if people are not people of character, then they should be critiqued. I'm so sick of Al Sharpton and Jesse Jackson claiming they care so much about black people when they've been in politics for years and years and years and haven't done a thing. You know what I mean? The family members of Martin Luther King support Trump. Ben Carson supports Trump. These are people of color that are prominent. Ben Carson is a brain surgeon. And they support Trump because they see that he truly wants what's best for America. And at the end of the day, the thing that will help black people the most is by helping everyone. Because when we help everyone and we don't single us out, then we're ending segregation. Because we're still segregated if we're all the ones living in low-income housing and all the white people are living over here because we've believed the lie that we need the government to survive. We don't need the government to succeed. All we need to do is work hard and we can move up. There's no country in the world that's better to be a person of color than America. And I truly believe that with all my heart.
Really interesting because the equity gap movement that the scorecard thing led to was such a deficit focus, right? It's like who's not thriving became the crisis. Just so you understand a little bit more about the context, it's called the Equity and Inclusion Council. I think it's had 3 different names. I've been a part of this, and a prior committee for 6 years and another DTF for 2 years before that. So I've been through a lot of iterations. And the groups will say, we're looking at multiple dimensions of diversity, right? We're looking at not just race. We're looking at ableism. We're looking at gender. We're looking at veteran status. We care about first-generation students at a low socioeconomic level, right? So they'll say a lot of things that apply to a lot more of our students, right? The dialogue always becomes foregrounded by race. It just goes there. And you're like, well, so this group is lower than the other group. And I'm like, actually, veterans are lower than that, or men are struggling more, but it's also really tricky anytime you have a room full of folks that are often recruited to these committees intentionally because of a particular agenda or a particular, particular expertise, maybe is a less politically charged word, but, both, I think, are in play. There's a way in which when I'm presenting an individual study and we can engage with it, it's different than when people with a plan and a charge want to focus only on the gaps. They're going to handpick out some of those gaps.
IR provided us with a wealth of data that told us a complete story of our work here on this campus. And once we looked into that data, we could not divert our gaze. At the end of the day, we came together and we devised a set of recommendations that we all could stand behind.
I don't think those recommendations very well match the data in some cases. And having been a part of the process, I will tell you that a lot of times the recommendations walked in the room from the very first kickoff meeting. And that then it became the burden of the data to try to for people to find some data to support what they believed. One of the examples was students of colors have poor retention. It walked in the room with people who walked in that room, and I said, that is a false statement. I don't know how many times I said that is a false statement.
So how do you feel about the wall?
I think. How do you feel about locks on your doors?
She asked you a question first.
Yeah, can you just answer it without
I
asking
feel like
a question?
the wall is like locks on your doors. You don't lock your doors at night because you hate everyone. You lock your doors at night because you want to protect the people within your house. And this country is our home, and we need to protect it. If you allow anyone to come across the border, and it's not just people of Hispanic descent, you've got terrorists that come across because because that's the only place that they're having. Have you seen how difficult it is to swim across frozen oceans into Canada? Can you?
Right next to us.
Yeah. So when they come here from other countries overseas to Canada to sneak into the United States, they have to go through Canada's security. Mexico is, it's not a very organized country. It's a lot easier to sneak into the United States from Mexico than it is to sneak into the United States from Canada. That's why we want to build a wall. And if you look at the human trafficking that goes across the southern border, if you look at the amount of drugs, it's a no-brainer. We definitely need a wall.
There are things that we recommended that represented our best thinking at the time, that also represented the data that was in front of us. And now we need to say, what's our next step? And we do need to take a next step.
We admit 98% of our students. We do not then ever give any form of assessment or reaching up of that student's skill level with a good placement in our curriculum, right? We can say, oh, welcome, but then fend for yourself. There are institutional questions about that sort of thing, but I will tell you that the weighted average analysis it helps to control for some of that noise. That is none of that mattered to the folks who walked in that room saying, students of color are less well retained. I'm like, actually, they've been within about a percentage as a group, right? Now they're talking about pooling all people of color together, right? As a group, they've been within about 1 percentage point of the retention of white non-Hispanic students for years here. There's hardly any gap, right? But people like to say it. They were attached to it. There were people who were attached to saying that even when I showed them data that said that's not the case.
Part of the thing that was challenging in all of this is this plan or this charge that we were given was highly complex. Thank you, George, very much. And we had to say, what is going to be a priority? So what we've offered up are recommendations for this academic year, because we realized that there was more work that we had to do. We had to take 20-something people and try to form a group. Y'all don't know how hard that is, because you know what? On my regular job, I teach in MIT. Everybody here has a regular job. People worked beyond their capacity to do this work. They may not name it, but it needs to be in this room. So when you look at it, you think about all the hard work that went into the recommendations. And then you think about how you're going to enter into that conversation, because again, this work on this campus and what we say we're about is student-centered.
Well, you probably couldn't vote at the time, but
Yeah.
if you could have voted, would you have voted for Obama?
Yeah.
And why would you have voted for him?
Well, I was younger. I was like under the influence of my mom, so I don't know. Like I was expected to, you know. So that's
Because
the thing,
what?
right?
Because you're black.
And is that what
That's
I just
exactly
said?
I'm
That's
saying.
what I just
And
told
I'm
him.
saying we should be voting with our minds and not our skin color.
I feel like it's not always that though. I feel like sometimes it's just
I mean,
you want to see somebody else like basically it often just like that reflects you personally. So like President Barack Obama, he had the same lifestyle as most black people. So and then with Donald Trump, you can't really see that because at the same time he was born different from what I was. He was raised different.
Do you think Obama had the same lifestyle as most black people in America?
Do most black people in America go to Ivy League schools?
No, I'm saying I'm saying that like an upbringing. Like basically you look at his whole life and people have connections to that. Like I'm not trying to say like the Ivy League school, but people like try to live up to that. And I feel like with Donald Trump, you really can't relate to that because his lifestyle is totally different. He had a higher lifestyle. Really.
So why did Obama say the American dream is to be Donald Trump?
When did he say that? Can you tell me when he said that?
Yeah, I believe it was in 1988.
I'm not sure when he said it, but he did
Yeah,
say
he
that.
said it was 1991. This is Vice. It's a liberal media. It said, young Obama said the American dream is to be Donald Trump.
So another key movement, it's not always just race-based retention and our failures as an institution rooted in historical racism that says that, which all of that is true. I don't mean to shrug that off, but that's not the only agenda that walks in. Another one is that there is still an ongoing conflict about what affirmative action means. And the problem is because people will come in and say, we need to hire more X. And you're like, actually, no. And it continues to play out. People can't quite let go of the notion. They don't want to be governed by that rule. Well, Evergreen should be different. I'm like, and jeopardize all future federal funding. Is that really how far you want to go here? I know myself and I know most people have more to keep learning because the world changes. You got to keep learning, and that we hope is happening. But that's professional development. It's not like who you hire. It's making sure that you're committed to continually improving how you serve your students and thinking about new nuances, right? So I think we can agree on that. When it came to the hiring, though, there are people who are like, we should be representational. We should be hiring intentionally, for example, Latino people because we have more Latino students, and it's illegal. There are 3 categories that we actually are holding ourselves accountable for: veteran status, disability, and race. And we can't hire to those, right? That's illegal. We can only monitor them or see if we have the kind of environment. You can do things like recruitment. You can recruit differently, advertise differently. You could create a better campus climate that was more welcoming. But you cannot make a hiring selection decision based on any of those criteria.
We weren't really, looking at that at the time. We were still in high school, learning about other stuff. We didn't care about politics. Like maybe now with the whole, maybe like Kamala girl Harris.
Issue that
I know she's
we were alive for. Have you heard of police brutality?
Yeah.
What have you heard about it?
That
It's a reoccurring
Yeah.
issue in the United States.
and basically they're getting away with it.
Who's getting away with it?
The police.
The police?
Yeah.
Do you know what the average insurance payout is to a person that's in an officer-involved shooting?
No.
It's $6 million. Does paying $6 million sound like they're getting away with it?
I mean, is paying $1 for each family member that the shooting victim is victimized by? I don't think that's an even payout either.
So the shooting member has 6 million family members?
No, as in the family, the people who got shot by the police, that person is dead, their family member. It was a news story where the judge or whatever gave them $4. It was $1 each for each family.
So the police shooting people isn't necessarily police brutality. You do realize that, right?
Is that
What?
Yeah, if you pull a gun on the police officer and he shoots you, that's not police brutality.
But they weren't pulling guns on them.
So,
What
so
story have you heard?
in multiple cases, they were in fact pulling guns on them, which is why they were killed. Name a situation.
Where they weren't, though.
You're the one who said it's multiple
We'll use
examples.
an unarmed person, Michael Brown. Michael Brown had his hand on the officer's gun. At that point, even though it's classified as unarmed, he was armed. He had his hand on the officer's gun. Not only that, he told the officer, "You're too much of a not going to say the word, to shoot me. He told the officer that to his face.
It doesn't matter what you say. That's still wrong.
It doesn't matter what you say. The police shouldn't have shot him when he had his hand on his gun. Why don't you go put your hand on a police officer's gun and see how that works out for you?
Does not mean
Okay,
that the
wait,
police should have
wait,
shot
calm
him.
down.
He didn't
calm
shoot him
down.
for saying that. He shot him for putting his hand on his gun and attempting to remove the officer's gun.
How do you know that he didn't shoot him because he said that, or because he put his hand on his gun?
There were multiple witnesses, and they gave what's called a sworn testimony in a court of law.
Okay, how many stories though were compared
So
to
of the police brutality stories that were heavily publicized, only one of them was actually an instance of true police brutality.
The purpose of this exercise that we have to do that we're doing together right now is to use our good minds to seek to understand the goals. Seek to understand the goals. And to notice the questions that we have that where it would help us to better understand the goals. You need to know that these goals are informed by the literature, by the data that we got from learned from the students, by much conversation. These are not arbitrary goals. They are informed goals. And what we want you to do is to read them and make sense of them. This is a sense-making exercise. Read them, make sense of them. This is about playing the believing game. Name what's important and valuable about these goals. And for the places where you're like, I don't understand, or you have a knee-jerk reaction to question, ask the question, what would help you to understand how we landed on these goals? So I want to hear from you. What's your first task? Read, and what's your second, what are you reading for?
Well, if I had known it was a Windows XP background, I would have stayed at home and stared at my computer. Oh, you're not Jeffrey. Well, if I wanted to see a stinky steam hole, I could have stayed at home, Jeff. Oh, you're not Jeffrey. Well, if I wanted to see Gravity at work, I could have stayed home and watched the DVD, Jeffrey. Oh, you're not Jeffrey. Well, if I'd known it was a big chunk of ice, I would have stayed home and cleaned the freezer, Jeffrey. Oh, you're not Jeffrey. Well, if I wanted to see a bluff, I would have stayed home and played poker, Jeffrey. Oh, you're not Jeffrey. Well, if I wanted to ride